Hey everybody. So I've been moving for the last 2 months, and that has prevented me from having the time or the internet access that I've needed to comment on various current affairs, not the least of which is the song Try That in a Small Town by Jason Aldean, which a number of you have requested that I comment on. So rather than take a hardline position left or right, we live in a culture where the news media essentially says, if you're conservative, here's your marching orders, now start shouting. If you're left wing, if you're liberal, here's your marching orders, now start shouting. And we just shout at each other. I like to kind of peel back the layers of something, because I very seldom find a situation where I'm unilaterally one way or the other. And my thoughts on this song are fairly multifaceted. So I'm going to start out with, I'm going to go through a few different stages. I'm going to talk about the musicality of the song. I'm going to talk about the alleged racial implication. Well, we're going to talk about the musicality of the song. We're going to talk about cancel culture. We're going to talk about the alleged racial undertones of the song. And then we're going to talk about the actual content of the song. So I clarify that because if you're the sort of person that's going to stop listening and start commenting the nanosecond you hear me say something you disagree with, rest assured, I'm here to explore a number of different angles. You're going to find things you agree with and things that you don't. And hopefully you can start realizing that the world is a little bit more nuanced than we would like to think that it is, a little more multifaceted. Anyway, so first and foremost, just my thoughts on the musicality of the song. Not a bad song. I listened to it a few times, found myself humming along with it, had that great kind of, that always kind of satisfying, satisfying Southern machismo, if you will. Musically, it was catchy and had a good kind of sense of dynamics, and his voice has a great country twang to it and everything like that. And it felt like it was stadium country, not pure authentic country like Johnny Cash or Waylon Jennings or David Allan Coe or something like that, but this kind of modern stadium country. But at the same time, it was still authentically that. It was not this bullshit where it's like they took a song that was obviously completely generated with computer effects and added a banjo in the background, and now they want to call it country music. No, it was real, at least real for the genre it was trying to be. One little thing I liked that I thought was kind of cute, if I'm interpreting this correctly, there's a little guitar riff that starts coming in that goes, and I think they may have changed it for the key, but other than that, I think that's the guitar riff that comes in on the refrain during Beat It by Michael Jackson. I thought, if that's the case, that's cute, just like they're quietly saying, beat it, get lost, get out of here. So I thought that was a clever musical thing, if I'm interpreting it correctly. Now to the matter of cancel culture. People have been saying this song shot up the charts and was, it shot up the charts and became a huge #1 hit. I believe it went to #1, yes, or at least on the country charts. But anyway, it became a huge hit and everything because of cancel culture, and now we're starting to see that cancel culture is increasingly powerless. To which I would say, not really. It's nice to think that artists are able to, an artist in any genre is able to soldier on despite these attempts to shut it down. This weird thing we've gotten ourselves into, where if a bunch of people on Twitter get really, really loud and noisy about not liking your thing, you're honor bound to end your career and liquidate your assets and go, plant trees and start serving the commonweal or something like that. This attitude, it's always nice to see people who are immune to that. That said, you have to realize, it's mainstream country music. This is a genre whose audience is center right at best and is going to be largely either indifferent to or actively contemptuous towards any left-leaning cancel culture efforts. So it's really not it's really not that much of an accomplishment, to be honest, because you're just courting the you're preaching to the choir. Basically, you're courting the you're courting the approval of people that were already giving you the approval. So it's really not much of a thing. Just like just like when a band like Iron Maiden or Merciful Fate or something like that puts out albums with a bunch of satanic imagery, and evangelical Christian groups start complaining about it, and then the band continues to do well. Well, their audience was never subject to caring about those people's opinions in the first place, and and also it's something, for some of those people it feels good to give them a big middle finger and see the album do well. So I wouldn't really call that triumphing over cancel culture. If you were to see an artist be subject to cancel culture and cancel culture is a left and right wing phenomenon, let's be fair, but if you were to see a left-leaning artist with a left-leaning audience be subject to cancel culture from the left and triumph and continue to do well in spite of it, then you would have a better case for saying that cancel culture is over. When people are not losing the audience to the cancel culture, an audience that's sympathetic to the cancel culture is not being lost to the cancel culture, then you would have a better argument for saying we're getting through cancel culture. It's kind of like, this current controversy that's consuming Lizzo and all of that. If Lizzo's career were continuing unabated, then you might be able to say she was immune to cancel culture, but she's obviously having a lot of trouble with it and everything. From what I understand, I try not to follow celebrity gossip bullshit. But anyway, so there's that. Those are my thoughts in that regard. Now, moving on to the issue of, is it racist or is it implicitly racist or anything like that? Well, as most people have admitted, there's no specific direct reference to racism within the lyrics of the song. The main thing that people have pointed to as a potential dog whistle for racism would be that in the music video, he's seen standing on the steps of a courthouse where a lynching was carried out 100 years ago. I would say if that's a dog whistle, it's a very, very weak one, especially when I watched, I've lived in the South most of my life, and I watched that video and did not even recognize the Capitol he was standing in front of. I thought it was indistinguishable from the many, 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 many courthouses, city, town square courthouses that adorn the main streets of southern United States, small town southern United States. If he was if he was like, standing on the balcony where Martin Luther King was shot or something like that, you might have in fact, that wouldn't even be a dog whistle at that point. That would be an overt nod to racism, things like that. But it's such a weak connection. Like if you found out about that, if you're somebody who's going to take him to task for that, and you only found out about it because you went and dug through the history of that town and found that there was this lynching that was carried out, yeah, that's pretty weak. But I do have more to say about that, however, because it's not necessarily racism, but it's still a cultural mindset that underpins racism. And I want to get to that in a minute. Talking about specifically the direct accusations of racism, though, the reality of it is, and I say this as somebody who loves visiting small southern towns, and I love chilling out on the Main Street Square, the town squares of small southern towns and that kind of thing. If you're ever in Georgia, Marietta has a great one. You'll love it. There's all kinds of cool stuff over there. Antique stores, vinyl record stores, all kinds of great stuff. I love that stuff. The reality of it is, though, that because of the history, the undeniable undeniable racist history of the southern United States, anytime you have a anytime you have a confrontational southern white man proclaiming the virtues of or proclaiming a willingness to protect a small southern town with violence, you're always going to have those undertones, and it's instantaneous, and it's not for nothing, man. I mean, it's not an act of extreme political correctness to acknowledge that there is a brutal history of racial violence in the southern United States. And so from there, I want to move on to the actual direct, blatant overtones of what the song is about. And that is this kind of honoring of small town vigilantism. And I will say, what he presents in the song, well, it's a nice idea in theory. To think that, we take care of our own, we care about people, we take care of our own, we look out for people, and honestly, if you saw some young punk punch an old lady in the face and steal her purse, I couldn't begrudge you chasing him down and getting it back from her. I mean, certainly not. None of that is a problem, but the real problem that underlies that perspective is that it leads to levels of vigilantism that are not that are very seldom justified. When you say our foundational premise is an attitude of suspicion and vigilantism and this idea that private citizens are somehow endowed with the right to enforce the law against one another and that sort of thing, that is a powder keg that not only will it be abused, but I would argue that it is probably abused more often than it's employed correctly. And there is this attitude in small towns of running the undesirables out of town. And while the things I'm about to describe did not occur one of them did occur in a small town area, but not all of them did. But all of them are indicative of the toxic mindset that I think is instantly born out of this kind of attitude. So think about three specific cases: Trayvon Martin, Ahmaud Arbery, and Jordan Neely. Now, I want to say beforehand, these are all cases that I've looked into very thoroughly, and you are not going to say, there is not one argument. If any of you are in favor of the people who killed these young men or supporters of them, you do not have one argument that I have not already heard. I am 100%. Now, I make it a policy to look at each situation in and of itself and decide how I feel about it based on the merits of each situation. There's situations where I support the person who, tragically as it was, support the person who carried out the act that ultimately resulted in death. An example of that would be something like Hakeem Littleton, who took out a gun, fired at a cop that was not engaging with him at all, fired in the cop's face and missed, and then got shot as a result. People tried to twist that into some kind of mistreatment. It's like, no, you cannot fire a gun directly into a cop's face and expect to live. That's ridiculous. But in the case of Trayvon Martin, Trayvon Martin, Ahmaud Arbery, and Jordan Penny, what you have are situations where they were confronted by people who were extremely tightly wound and ended up killing them for things that did not deserve killing, did not require that they be killed. Trayvon Martin was walking down a street in a neighborhood where he had family and had every right to be walking down that street. And a highly strung, tightly wound lunatic with a history of anger issues that previously had resulted in him having an altercation with a cop that forced him to go to court-ordered anger management, followed him down the neighborhood, got out of the car against the request of, or against the instruction of the dispatch officer he was speaking to, followed him on foot, and then got in an altercation with him that ultimately resulted in Trayvon Martin being killed. All of that Trayvon Martin was not an immediate threat to anybody's life. He did not deserve to be put in a situation that would result in a fight, let alone getting shot. And I don't care at all what any of you have to say in support of George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman is a monster, and I truly believe it's only a matter of time before he kills again. The men who shot, I don't remember their names at the moment, but the men who shot Ahmaud Arbery, they saw him walking around inside of a house that was up for sale. They chased him he made him run for 5 minutes on foot while they chased him in vehicles, confronted him with shotguns, and shot him to death. Now, you're going to inevitably, of course, say, well, there was footage that showed him grabbing for one of the shotguns. Yeah, because he was in a situation where he had to defend himself. And you're going to say, well, you know, I've heard people say things like, well, if somebody approached me with a shotgun, I would stop. It's like, they're not law enforcement. He's not required to show them any kind of decorum, any kind of, just stop. Just stop trying to defend these people. In the case of Jordan Neely, you're going to want to say, oh, Jordan Neely was a career criminal who had a history of assaulting people on the subway train, et cetera, et cetera. Well, he did not. The only person who has claimed that he assaulted anybody was the man who killed him, Daniel Penny. I just remember his last name was Penny. But anyway, the only person that's claimed he assaulted anybody was Penny, which was him throwing a jacket at somebody and yelling things. There has been video footage emerge of Jordan Neely that showed that before he was assaulted by Daniel Penny, he was calm. He was speaking in a reasonable, calm tone of voice. He was not yelling. He was explaining his situation. There have now been multiple witnesses that have come forward and gone on record saying that, in fact, it was Mr. Penny who was looking irate and uncomfortable with Jordan Neely and who assaulted him out of nowhere and for no reason. I do not believe that there is absolutely, I believe that there's absolutely no defense of any of the people who killed these young men. None of these young men were doing things that called for death. The only one, if Trayvon Martin was looking in people's windows does not, the punishment for looking in people's windows is not death. If Ahmaud Arbery was walking around that housing development because he was looking for a place to stash drugs, the penalty for stashing drugs is not death. If Jordan Neely was yelling on the subway, the punishment for yelling on the subway is not death. Not one of these people was doing anything that required them to be killed. But that's the attitude that's fostered by within a song like Try That in a Small Town. Now, to be very clear, 99.9999999999999% of people who listen to Try That in a Small Town are not going to go out there and kill people. Additionally, there's certainly nothing to suggest, definitely the first two were not motivated by Try That in a Small Town because it didn't exist. There's nothing to suggest that the Jordan Neely altercation was motivated by Try That in a Small Town. And even if it were, that would not mean censoring the song for people who are able to listen to it responsibly and not go out and kill people. We have individual rights, and with that comes individual responsibility. And we are not punished collectively, or we are not to be punished collectively. Anyway, so The thing is, though, what I don't like about that message is that the people who get a little chode, pop a little chode for the idea of vigilante justice are usually very tightly wound, and they usually completely misjudge the situations that they insert themselves into, and start carrying out lethal levels of vigilante justice in situations that do not call for it. Absolutely do not call for it. And so that's the problem, not with the song, but with that attitude. The song is not the instigator of that attitude, but that attitude is a problem. And again, there are situations where it's totally appropriate to come to the aid of somebody, to help them, and in so doing enact violence against another person. That is that can be a part of being a good Samaritan. I was in a situation years ago when I was an Uber driver. I was in a situation where I was in a tightly packed row of cars that was moving it was going towards the carpool lane of a nightclub. And I was in front of this apartment building that had a pavement path, can't think tonight, a sidewalk path going up to the front door and then grass for the rest of it. A woman came running out of that building, and there was a man behind her who ran up, shoved her to the ground, jumped on top of her, grabbed her by the hair, and started pounding her face into the pavement, and punching her and beating up on her. And another man came running from the nearby building, came running at top speed and laid into that motherfucker as hard as he could. I was not in a position where I could get out of my car. Otherwise, I would have come and laid into that motherfucker as hard as I could. Instead, once the line moved a little bit and I could turn and park my car, I came and, the guy ran off, and the first guy ran off and the second guy ran off after him. So I parked my car and came and helped the woman get up, and I stayed with her until the cops came. And if I had been able to if I had been in a position where I could have gotten out of my car right then, I would have come and beat on that guy too. And by the way, the woman actually declined to press charges. She said to the police officer, she said, "You have to understand he's not really like that." And I said, "He just did it to you. He's like that." She wouldn't press charges, amazingly. But anyway, I bring that situation up to say that is an example of a time when absolutely you should intervene in helping another person that is in immediate physical danger. Of course. And there are things in that song that, if we're talking about things where an old woman is assaulted and someone runs off with her purse, yeah, go run the guy down, knock him down, get the purse back. That's understandable. The problem is, like I said, there's people who pop a little chode at the idea of getting to be vigilante heroes. And those are the George Zimmermans of the world. Those are the Daniel Pennies of the world, the people who grossly overestimate or grossly misinterpret the nature of a situation, insert themselves into an altercation that does not concern them, and they end up killing somebody that did not need to die. Again, even if any of those three people were behaving in inappropriate ways, the penalty for the ways they were behaving was not death. And certainly not death carried out by a private citizen that had elected themselves judge, jury, and executioner. Anyway, and again, I know all of the George Zimmerman defenders out there are going to show up and say, but he was when they found George Zimmerman, he had contusions on the back of his head and he was bleeding, and Trayvon Martin only had bruising on his knuckles. And yeah, I'm aware of all of that. That just means he was winning. He was winning a fight that he deserved to win because there was some creepy weirdo that got out of a car with two heavy flashlights and a gun and started following him around. God, just reverse the races and figure it out from there. Anyway, so that's where I stand on Try That in a Small Town. You know, something I've alluded to in my videos before is I have actually some real scars from living in a small town. And I've talked about a vigilante mob of bullies I had to deal with who would beat up girls for talking to me. And to this day, if I go on dates with a woman, I'm going to be 40 fairly soon. If I go on dates with a woman, to this very day, I'm like waiting for the PTSD part of me, and I do have PTSD. That part of me is like looking for the redneck that's going to come in and call me a faggot and punch her in the face for being out with me. I've seen the insanity that this Papa Little Chode for vigilantism attitude has. I will also say this. The reason I moved from the place I was in is because two guys were, the police told me that most likely what was happening was this was a drug deal that went bad, but there was a shooting directly outside my apartment door. The guy unloaded about 2.5 magazines worth of ammunition. I heard him stop and reload twice. And then the cops showed up, and he ran off when he heard the cops coming. That's, when I heard that happen, when I heard him start shooting, I went and got behind the stove in my kitchen and called the police. And the dispatch officer had the gall to ask me, said, "Can you see him?" I was like, I'm not, he's shooting a gun. I'm not going to open my door and look at him. But, even in that situation, I am glad that, yes, if somebody had come out and shot the guy, it would have ended the situation a lot quicker. But I still would rather the police handle these things, even in that case, even in that instance. And it's weird the thoughts that you have when something like that happens. I was literally sitting there thinking I may have just signed this guy's death warrant. The cops may be about to come kill a human being because of my actions. And that's the mind, as odd as that is, that's still the mindset I think you should have. You should never be popping a little chode for the idea of getting to kill somebody in a vigilante attack or a vigilante altercation. That should never be your desire, what you're desiring. And that's why when I see people like Michael Knowles that are practically sitting there masturbating when they talk about the actions of people like Daniel Penny, I know that what's motivating those people is bloodlust, and it's just this bloodlust and this desire to this desire to prevail upon weaker people and that kind of thing. And that is the problematic undercurrent of Try That in a Small Town, is that the people who relish it, and what he's doing, he's definitely relishing the thought of vigilante justice, carrying out violence against people as a private citizen in retaliation. He's definitely relishing it in that song. And the people who relish that, who are relishing the thought of carrying out vigilante justice, that's the George Zimmermans of the world, and I can't think of their names, the guys that shot Ahmaud Arbery, and the Daniel Pennies of the world, those guys. I worry about emboldening those guys. Now, again, to be very clear, I'm not for censorship. I don't believe that, just like I don't believe that the Columbine killer, that Marilyn Manson should be blamed for the Columbine killings, I also don't believe that Aldean, I can't think, it's late, I can't think. I don't think that Jason Aldean should be blamed for any vigilante killings that happen. I'm not suggesting that at all. But I am saying that I don't like his attitude and I don't like the message of the song. So hopefully that clears everything up.